Morning guys, welcome back to the channel. Eugene Cousins here. Alright, so today I'm just quickly going to be covering the F-Lite high hang points machine, although the video will cover the low hang points as well in a sense. So I've been getting a lot of emails and messages on our international group with a request just to give a review or some more information about the F-Lite, you know, what my long-term findings is on it. Now, it's not really fair for me to call anything that I do a review because it's obviously biased. I work with Nirvana on the design of these machines, you know, what the layout should be for the customers. As we get feedback from the customers, we adapt the design and so forth. So it just keeps on going on. All right, so the latest edition that we have of the F-Lite is the high hang points machine. Although if it's already prepared for low hang points, so swing arms are just added to it. And that makes it the low hang point machine. Although to be fair, it's not completely low hang points, it's a little bit higher up, so you should look at it to be around a medium hook in point setup if you take that the swing arm setup. All right, so I've been flying the machine for about, I would say about 150-200 hours, and it's for me, this isn't a machine that I would ever want to sell. I don't see really how, you know, unless something else comes in dramatically to change the engine performance, I'd be happy to stay on this machine for the remainder of my career. So it's like that finale, that, you know, getting to the point where you don't really see how it could improve past this point. I'm really happy with the end result of what we put together in this package, simply because I'm a cross-country pilot. And I think that that's the biggest point of departure for most pilots. It should be, at least. What are you going to use the machine for? Is it for sport class flying or acrobatic class flying, or is it going to be for cross-country flying? You see, cross-country pilots, for them, the biggest thing that they look forward to is to extend their range and also reduce their weight. You don't want to do any of those if you are sacrificing power as well. So that is why you wouldn't necessarily, if you're a heavier guy, you wouldn't look at something like the Top 80 or the the Atom 80. You wouldn't necessarily want to look at something like that because you're sacrificing power in order to get range and a better fuel economy. And so that's really what the manufacturers have been chasing. Polini 202, they brought out the new range. When I say new range, is the water-cooled range with the 202, the 303. They are really great additions to the Polini range because you now have a high output motor, which is, you know, it's got the same output as what the Instinct 230 used to have. I say used to have, it still does do that, but we don't manufacture it anymore. So it's got 33 horsepower, but it's run about the same weight range as the Instinct 230 at around, you know, the lightest, mounted on the lightest frame is going to come in around 31 kilos dry, no reserve chute quoted on that. And so I hate quoting numbers like that simply because you don't have a real perspective of what your final weight is going to be when you're flying cross country, because the fuel economy, the fuel burn per hour really determines what your final weight's going to be, because it's got this fantastic dry weight. Now you add all the fuel that you need for flying a certain distance, and that total weight is what you're going to be running around with on the ground. And that is the total weight that's going to affect your power to weight ratio. Now, so the Polini they did a lot of great things with those engines because you have an improved fuel economy on the 202, although they didn't improve on the weight, I would say. I think it got a little bit worse in actual fact. But you know, I would still say that the benefit there is that the fuel economy is improved. So when pilots have to refuel that machine with a nice 17-liter tank, they know that they're going to hit quite a range to do that. And that's why I say that for the, you know, I do recommend the Polini 202 and the 303 because they are both reliable engines. Maybe the 303 is not as reliable as the 202, but basically they do offer reliability, and I recommend it to the heavier range of pilots. When you are going to go above 90 kilos in body weight, it is a good option to take. The 80s to 90 kilo pilots, you could look at both those options, but you do have to realize that once the fuel is added with the engine weight, with the with a reserve chute, all of that piles up and it becomes a heavier package. And pilots like myself, between the 80 and 90 kilos or 190 pounds, that becomes a consideration when you're doing something like the Icarus and you've got all your camping weight, your water, your fuel, everything is packed on, your food, everything, all those bags. I was 170 kilos for takeoff on the Icarus 2018, and I was flying the Instinct 230. So that had a huge effect on me, affected my experience all around, and I wish that this final product would have been done for that race, because that would have had a significant difference for me in the overall experience. But let me get back on track. So initially, when the Polini came out, a lot of guys were quoting numbers of something between 2.9 and 3 liters per hour, and that's why I say you've got to take that with a pinch of salt. The numbers that our manufacturers are quoting and pilots are quoting are usually based on the fact that they're flying trims closed. And they're trying to get to the best possible number. And obviously that is affected by the size of the canopy that you're flying as well. So if you're in the lower weight ranges of the canopy, you are going to get better numbers. And so those numbers initially, I took that with a pinch of salt, but you know what, we got to see that happen or see that transpire in the actual world. And in the Speedrun Cup is something that I created in order for pilots to be able to do direct comparisons between different brands. Also do not just that, but on the canopy comparisons as well, what speeds they get, what fuel economy they get, and the real world numbers that came out on the Polini 202 when speed bars also engages around 8.5 liters an hour. So as far, but let's be generous here. If you're going to be flying like a normal person on racing, you are going to get a good number of around 4.5 to 5.5 liters an hour on the Polini 202. And that's pretty good for a heavy pilot. And that's why I say I recommend that engine, because as soon as you couple reliability to that package, it does make sense for a heavier guy, because weight on his back is less of an effect on a lightweight pilot than that same weight on his back. Okay, so that's covering the Polini engine. Then the Vittorazi and the Air Conception machines, I would say the Air Conception machines offered less reliability when seeing in the net result in racing, because of just I would say failures on the machines. But that's also been a long-term prospect for them to try and improve on. Whether they're doing that, I don't know. I have seen that the nitros the 200s have been really reliable. They have rather good fuel efficiency, so they had a really good product offering from that side. The 280 was a bit more work, but I'd like to get onto that topic because I do get a lot of questions about the 280, and I would say that there is no question that the 280 offers the best power to weight ratio. One of the biggest effects that we are looking for that's going to make a remarkable difference in your flying experience is the power to weight ratio. And so with that enormous amount of power that it gets, around 35 horsepower that'll put out, 34 to 35 horsepower, on something that weighs around 21 to 22 kilos, that has been a really great power to weight ratio. So for the general aviation pilot, and I've seen there's been a lot of long-term reviews on the AC280, and basically the pilot's feedback would be that if that's your sole machine that you're going to be using, you are looking at a lot more failures and maintenance intervals in general. But the net effect of flying the aircraft when it's working has always been really positive. So it's a good experience to fly that machine, and you just have to be prepared for doing more maintenance and more repairs on your machine. But that's not the end of the world. When it comes to the Vittorazi, I've always been critical of the Vittorazi in the sense that they have reliability issues on the exhaust, and my criticism towards them was just to improve on the reliability and also the fuel economy. These are things that they can do through research and development processes, the same way Nirvana and Polini has done. And I think that's why I'm getting on topic, is that a lot of questions I'm getting from the public is, how does the Vittorazi EFI change my perspective on the brand? And do I feel it's going to be a reliable engine? There is no way that I can answer that right now. I have not flown the Vittorazi EFI, but I do respect a lot of pilots that have flown it already. And the feedback that's coming back from them is that it's really good in fuel efficiency. Its numbers is comparable to the Nirvana 200 engine. And the two companies, I would say all three companies, Polini, Vittorazi EFI, and the Nirvana 200 engine, they've all had very different approaches in order to try and get to a better fuel economy figure overall. So the Vittorazi's, the new FI was a long-term development for them, and basically with direct injection into the engine and having the computer now do that, they automatically have to have batteries and computer and everything else, which now makes the standard Vittorazi heavier as an engine. So it's, from what I've been told, it's 4 kilograms heavier. It's about a little bit less, well, about 8 pounds heavier. Now, that affects your power to weight ratio. So you're going to have a worse power to weight ratio, where the Vittorazi on a lightweight titanium frame, like on the McFly and on the Parajet titanium Maverick, they weren't lightweight to start with. We're looking at around 25 kilos for one of those machines. That's without a reserve chute or without fuel. So an extra 4 kilos puts you close to the 30 kilo mark, which is close to what the Polini 202 weighs. So I believe that they did achieve their goal, which is to bring out a machine that is really fuel efficient, but they sacrificed on the power to weight ratio. There are other benefits that comes into having the EFI system, and I've been told that it's a very smooth power band. It's got a tiny bit more power, apparently just a tiny bit, so it's not really something to take into account. And it's we don't know about the reliability. That'll be determined in the long term and with end customer reviews. But basically, they have achieved their goal of getting the Vittorazi 185 engine to be more fuel efficient. And we've seen those numbers being really ridiculous when we're doing cross-country flying and something like the Speedrun Cup, anywhere between 8 and 12 liters per hour when the speed bar is engaged, when you want to try and get to that 50 mile per hour mark, that the fuel consumption went through the roof. And the EFI now brings something to the table. And for the record, and please hear me on this, I'm saying that I want to congratulate Vittorazi for going through the process and doing something that is going to bring them into the new age of technology. They've done something really incredible doing the EFI project. They've probably spent a ton to do it. And so I congratulate them on completing that project and bringing it to market. I'd love to see that machine, love to fly that machine. I'd love to get my hands on it. So it is a really positive development for Vittorazi, and that is why I am recommending the Vittorazi EFI based on other pilots' inputs. But to be fair, I cannot give you an opinion on whether it's reliable or not, but I do think they're on the right track. And there will be failures on the computer and things like that because it's the initial offering. And this is what we experienced in the F-Flights. We had a lot of problems in the beginning, especially because we launched this machine right in COVID, and the suppliers were cutting corners. When I say suppliers, talking about the motherboards and the computerized systems. These things are made outside of Nirvana, and those guys were cutting corners, and we had some problems. And because we are all new mechanics on these new systems, we had to try and figure out where the problems lie and how we fix it best, how to come up with warranty processes. But that, whenever you do introduce a new generation of technology, you are facing a situation where you got to get through those teething problems. So I think we can expect teething problems from the Vittorazi, but in the end, the net result will be extremely positive for them as a brand, and you'll find more pilots going for that. The numbers, like I said, is very equal to what Nirvana offers on the 200, but achieved in a very different way. And with the worse power to weight ratio, because their solution automatically includes more weight, I would say that it'll appeal to the lighter pilots, not the heavier pilots. That's my 5 cents worth, even though I haven't flown it, so just take it for what it is. I think a lot of pilots want my interaction on that topic, and that's why I'm just giving you my 5 cents worth. But I do recommend that. I actually think that it will sell well, and I think it's going to be a good solution. Even though it is a bit more expensive, it brings them into a more reliable segment, a solution for their product range all over. The exhaust is something in long term they have applied their minds to it. The newest exhausts give a lot less problems, so I see reliability improving on that side as well, as far as monitoring comments and people within the clubs and that fly. But let me explain that just quickly. We represent a couple of clubs under my dedicated training organization here in South Africa. It is a very regulated form of sport, and training is extremely regulated. And we are probably one of the biggest schools in South Africa now, representing more than 270 pilots in our combined clubs. And therefore, I'm applying a more open-minded and more inclusive approach when it comes to the different brands. In actual fact, the partnerships that we are all together, for the tourism projects and flying projects that we have, we are actually offering a variety of machines. You can get a Vittorazi EFI, you can get a Polini and you can get the Nirvana, all offered to the base of customers. And the reason why we have to do that is because of brand loyalty. You'll get some Vittorazi owners which will never look at anything else, so don't even try and convince them, but rather offer them a solution that they are loyal to, that they would want to experience. And the same goes for the Polini guys, same goes for the Nirvana guys. They're brand loyal, and we got to try and solve that. So within this huge number of pilots that we represent, we rather come up with an inclusive project or program to help all of these pilots achieve their end result, which is to be better pilots, to fly for further, to do more adventure trips, being capable of doing more adventure trips and do better on these long-range cross-country missions like the Icarus and things like that. All right, so that is to try and explain why I'm discussing all the different brands, because we are able to offer that as well throughout our partnerships, not myself. All right, so getting into the F200, coming back to the way we achieve that, because the automatic question comes, now we've seen the EFI, we've seen the result of the EFI, how does that compare to the Nirvana? And I have to try and explain that in a technical base so you guys can understand. So you undo these two bolts and the back panel comes out. This is one of the nicest things about the Nirvana design, is I can now access my engine fuel lines, a visual inspection. I can see what's going on my cylinder, my head, and to try and explain how we achieve this. This is the computer. This is the coil computer. So there's two different circuits and electronic systems that cooperate and work together here to achieve. And I got the last element here I've got to show. It's on the side of the machine. When I pull the battery out, this is the battery. So part of our solution was to reinvent the battery pretty much. And I believe from the comments that I got is that the Vittorazi EFI does not have a lightweight battery, but this is part of the R&D from Nirvana's side, as they went to the University of Prague and they designed a new battery system. And this actually gives you 60 starts, hundreds of kilometers worth of flight range. And that powers the computer and this system, which is delivering the incredible net result. How do we do that? This computer controls the spark to the engine. So the computer has full control over the power band of the engine. That's how we get a smooth power band. That's how we get more than 1,000 RPM more than the older Nirvana 200s and even the 230s. We are producing more, the end result, through an improved power to weight. What do I mean with improved power to weight? The old Nirvana 200 on an Instinct used to weigh close to around 28, 29 kilos on an Instinct 200. Now this weight goes down to around 25 kilos depending on the setup that you have and how many accessories you have on it. But the standard one with the integrated harness can go down to as low as 22 kilos on the Nirvana the F-Lite system. So that power to weight, how much power you put out for how much weight you have, that helps the pilot get off the ground and have better climb rates, etc. The power was increased quite a bit, where you would have a tad more than 6,000 RPM on this engine. You could get more than 7,000 RPM on this engine, on this, running equal types of systems. When I say systems, I mean propeller, etc. So improving on that, we are working on new propellers so we can increase the thrust and keep the weight down, but the battery powers the computer system that controls the spark, and we are able to tap out completely. Now, I mean, tapping out means going full speed bar for hours on end. We are able to not burn more than 5.5 liters an hour. So that is pretty much getting to the end of it, and that's on something like the Warp 2, where you're doing 57 miles an hour as a top speed, and we can maintain that speed and not run the engine hotter because of some special secret sauce in the computer programming which keeps the temperature down. So I would not have a spike in my temperature, and I have the computer to thank for that, the display, so I can monitor the temperature, the RPM, the head temperature, the exhaust gas temperature, and the RPM. I can see all of that displayed on the computer, so I've got a good idea of what the engine is doing, and that's all powered by the tiny battery. So you see, the way we achieved the fuel economy is very different from what Vittorazi did. Polini, on a completely different system as well. They increase compression, and they've got a water-cooled engine. Reliability is high, but you are carrying water on your back, and that means that's why the power to weight has been affected by the heavier weight. But it's reliable, and it offers a really good fuel economy throughout that range as well. So those are the three very different systems. So what are my comments on this system? What are my long-term findings on it? I think it is reliable. I didn't have any problems with that, but the initial machines that came out experienced computer problems, and we had to try and catch up to find the problems, and we did find the problems, and we did do warranty replacements for pilots that had that issue. So we don't have any means on this engine to charge the battery, neither does the Vittorazi. So you've got to be aware of, you can either increase the battery capacity on these, or you could fly with more than one on an adventure. And you can have a battery charge in your car charger or a 220 charger to keep this powered up. But this is not something that affects me. It's one of the very last things that I would even mention to as a consideration is I never run out of power for my flights. I've never, not in a single flight in any of the years that I've been flying this, have I had a problem with overall power on an adventure or something like that when I running out of battery power. So this is an incredibly efficient system, and by just carrying more than one battery, it's never been a problem for me to solve. The other thing about the long-term review I would say is that if you are pilots that find themselves in really cold climates, these are lithium batteries. High density lithium batteries. So what happens is that if you store this machine in really cold temperatures outside, like in a shed or a hangar or something like that, and it drops down to 0 degrees, next morning on a very cold morning, you're trying to put this machine on your back, you are going to lose a lot of battery power capacity to this. So you got to warm the battery up before you fly. So I usually put this in my pocket, in my pants, next to my groin or something like that. So you don't want to borrow my battery. And I heat the battery up while I put my wing out and things like that. Or I charge it in the morning by putting in the latex glove, putting in hot water so there's no water on the battery. That warms the battery up quite quick as well with a little hot water. But it doesn't touch the battery. Very important too, otherwise you get rust on it. And that solves the problem there with capacity in cold climates. What else do we have on this? I think that this has been a very long journey, very tough journey for Nirvana to solve, was how to store the fuel without building a new fuel tank and doing something uncomfortable on this machine. Now it's important to realize why this is a difficult process. I'm turning this machine around. You see, one of the big criticisms I have for the metal cut machines, most of the brands cut their machines out of metal, except something like the McFly, which has got the carbon struts. But they all have the separate fuel can at the back, which is exposed in a lot of cases to the exhaust. And I've always tried to explain that it's better to protect the fuel tank from the exhaust, not because of the heat translating from the exhaust to the fuel tank in flight, but when there's a really extremely hard knock on the ground where the tanks can flex back into the hot exhaust, a crash and the pilot's trapped in his machine. And we've had fatalities on that. I'm explaining that is, this is the reason why I have that reaction. It's not because I'm trying to be funny, but because of studying incident reports and recommending that. So even on the Parajet systems, we've seen guys put reflectors, taping the reflectors to their tanks, which is a great way of protecting the heat from the fuel tank to the exhaust. So we had that problem that we can't build a larger fuel tank because there's a carbon fiber and Kevlar protection cover between the tank and the exhaust. And so we had to come up with this 8-liter fuel capacity bag at the top. It can shrink down with Velcro to around a 3.5, 4-liter capacity, and you could extend it and it becomes, well, I just ripped it out, but it's Velcro, it's stuck into the bottom of it, but you can fix it. I'm not fixing mine to the bottom of it. And this takes another 8 liters fuel bladder. And so I've got an 18-liter capacity. And with that tapped out fuel capacity, I can do 57 miles an hour for 5 hours. No, I can't. That's bullshit. I can do 57 miles an hour for 2.5 hours at least. And if I bring that down to flying normal speeds, like just your trim speed alone, I can extend that past 5.4 hours. And if I was going to fly at the same way that other guys quote their figures, I'll do over 9 hours on this. So, and that is what you could expect from the Vittorazi EFI as well. If they have something like an 18-liter tank, they'll be able to achieve those numbers as well. So nobody flies like that. That's why, nobody flies really slow from one point to the other. You're going to trap yourself in rougher air conditions later on. Therefore, flying at full trim speed is the holy grail in paramotoring cross-country flying right now. You want good fuel-efficient numbers while flying at full trim speed. That's where we want to quote numbers. And if I quote my numbers on this at full trim speed, it is 3.5 liters an hour on the Warp 2, which is 65 kilometers an hour speed. That is something in the long-term review that I'm reflecting on. And whether it's this prop or it is the two-blade Nirvana, it'll tap out at 3.5. And if you're running the three-blade Nirvana, it'll do a little bit less than that. So this propeller is something that we're working on. It's just a prototype. It's not something that you could buy. So don't ask me where I got it, where I can buy it. This is in development, and something will be coming out to replace it. That'll go onto the center bolt system of the Nirvana. We are really working hard on that to make that happen. But there's a lot of considerations, because when we make a propeller set, it's got to be the right length. The frame is affected. And we're also trying to get that prop to be efficient on all of our paramotors. So it's got to be a good compromise all around. Okay, guys. I'm not going to get into other details on the machine. I think if you want to know more details on the F-Lite, then you could obviously look at what I've done on the other technical introduction videos. I'll put the description in this video. And then as far as flying goes, on the high hang points, the effective high hang points versus the low hang points versus, how we do in cross country, how this machine actually flies. I'll be doing that on an actual flying adventure that I'm really working hard on, but authorizations and getting these things done in Africa always takes a lot of time to achieve. So I'll do a physical flying video on this. And then the last thing I'm going to mention is that this machine has actually been dubbed the flying tank by some other guys that have flown the machine, that have been flying their machines. And this is in reference to the fact that this is a Kevlar carbon fiber full skeleton. There is no metal doing reinforcement here. And this is incredibly strong. And with having the aluminium struts and the aluminium frame, you have something that is incredible, that is cheap to replace if it does take a hammering. But this skeleton has to survive no matter what you take as far as a crash goes. So it's lightweight, but incredibly expensive to make, and it's incredibly tough. So those heavy prangs, arrested cable landings in trees, being dragged all over the place like we've seen some videos, these skeletons and systems are made to last. They're incredibly strong as far as design capability goes. And another nice thing that I have to mention is the fact that this is a quick release harness, and it just attaches using these pins. So one thing that I've realized when I'm training students now that fly other brands, they can't take their harnesses off. And having a quick release harness like this on the high hang points machine, it's not available on the low hang points machine, doesn't release as quick. So having something that releases in 20 seconds is nice to have for the guys that want to do a bit of ground handling with their wings from time to time. That's another very nice feature as well. It's a very lightweight harness with an underseat reserve. And once you've got all that packed in and working, you have something that's really great. Okay, guys, that is the fastest possible way I can do this full explanation, answering some questions, answering some current topics. And I'll be seeing you on the next flying adventure. Hopefully that happens sooner than me making another video. Adios.